What or who am I writing for? Over the course of this process, you're going to need to think about purpose, audience, and form, the Holy Trinity. Hi, I'm Jane Hando, and today we are going to get stuck into the writing process. We're looking at the creative process, section C of creating text, unit 3, area of study 2. So what's in this lesson? Breaking it down, we're looking at purpose, audience, and form. We're looking at the different ways that you can write. So writing to express, writing to reflect, writing to explain, and writing to argue. I'm going to check out the sample exam task, and we've got some sample responses to an example prompt that we're going to guide you through. Don't forget to check out the most relevant study design dot points as you are embarking on your own writing journey. So let's revisit some of the study design skills. So you're going to have to create text with a stated purpose and an understanding of context. You're going to experiment with vocabulary, text structures, and language features for effective and cohesive writing. You're going to experiment with and extend vocabulary for effective and cohesive writing. So Unit 3, Outcome 2, think about what the task is asking of you. So on completion of this unit, the student should be able to demonstrate effective writing skills by producing their own text designed to respond to a specific context and audience to achieve a stated purpose and to explain their decisions made through writing processes. Breaking down the task, it's really useful to frame the task as a series of questions. So what is my purpose? What's my context? Who's my audience? What form of writing piece best suits my purpose, context, and audience? What's going to get most traction? What's going to be most compelling? What voice best suits my purpose, context, and audience, e.g. first person, third person, neutral, formal? What vocabulary will enable me to communicate effectively and to write cohesively? Finally, what text structures and language features will help me write effectively? So let's consider writing to express. What does it mean to write expressively? So you're going to prioritize feelings rather than events. Expressive writing can have a clear structure or it can be free-flowing. So there's a variety of options there. There may be a clear arc, like a short story plot with a beginning, middle, and end, but sometimes that may not be relevant to what it is that you want to achieve. So sometimes expressive writing can mimic the style of a story that reaches a climax and resolves itself by the conclusion. Expressive writing is not so much about what happened as it is about how you feel about what happened or is happening. So find your voice, really crucial. So some key ingredients, it can be free-flowing. It's guided by emotion. First person perspective is usually what's applied. You can use informal language. The tone is obviously personal and driven by anecdote. So here's some writing to express phrases and some vocabulary choices that might be useful to you. So you might say something like, it seemed to me that, as a ponderous kind of reflective way of thinking about whatever it is that is concerning you or worrying you or annoying you. I was aware of. It struck me that. It appeared to me that. I was conscious of. Note that these phrases and vocabulary choices are kind of reflective. So they're thinking about something that has happened and pondering that. I was conscious of. I was cognizant of. The confusing thing was, it dawned on me that. I felt confused, uncertain because. So we're also sort of thinking about, there's been some moment of change. The moment has transpired and something new has emerged from that moment. What incensed me was, what annoyed me was, what I couldn't get out of my mind was, I couldn't believe that. After all this time, only now did I. The funny thing was, I wondered then if, perhaps after all, I suddenly realised that. Note the tonal shifts there too. There may be moments where there's a startling revelation or maybe there's a sad kind of truth to what's happened. It wasn't until after that something in me changed. I knew somehow that things were different. I considered the thing again. This new insight gave me I was overwhelmed by. The significance of what I had come to realise made me. Whilst not instantly apparent, slowly the revelation that. So hopefully those phrases and vocabulary examples are useful in guiding you to write in a way that expresses your thoughts. So I've got an example now. So the purpose is to express, and the form is a blog expressing the frustration in the limitations of our systems of communication. The other day I walked past a colleague who ignored me. I mulled over this slight for the entire day. Had I done something to offend Olivia? Had I forgotten to acknowledge her in some way? Had I said something offensive? I racked my brain, but I could not think of anything I had done to cause this frosty reception. Had I been Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory, I possibly would have passed by Olivia without detecting her strange demeanour and hence thought nothing more of the moment. But for those with a heightened sensitivity to such things, a vacant stare, a head turn, or a raised eyebrow can be the source of considerable consternation. The scenario highlights just how tricky communication is and compels me to question whether we can ever truly understand the inner worlds of our friends, neighbours, work associates, husbands, wives, and children. Okay, so now we're moving on to writing to explain. So a bit of an overview of explanatory writing. Explanatory writing tells your audience how something works or why something happens. Explanations detail and logically describe the stages in a process, such as the water cycle or how a steam engine works. Other examples could be how a law is made or why we blink when we sneeze. Explanation texts are frequently incorporated into other texts and used to provide information that answers questions of interest on that topic. So don't forget, you can write hybrid forms of writing that incorporate different elements of a text type. And your writing could be both to explain but also to reflect. So, think about the different options here. Don't be limited by one specific, purpose. So key ingredients, normally you've got step-by-step instructions, sequencing of ideas, logic, use of technical terms, the present tense, listing ideas. You've got connective language, cause and effect. There's also titles and subtitles that can be used in this form of writing as well. Examples to reiterate or to reinforce your explanations, and comparisons are also useful. So writing to explain, some phrasing and vocabulary examples. You can see these are examples of what we've just listed previously. So firstly, additionally, furthermore. Secondly, lastly, finally, likewise. You always know where you are in terms of an explanatory piece of writing. Likewise, similarly, in conclusion, moreover, the reason for is because, this is how you might, how does, what is, who might, when will, this leads to, this causes, afterwards, as a consequence of. So hopefully they're useful to you if you want to write an explanatory piece of writing. And now we're moving to an example of writing to explain. Now this is mixing it up a little bit. So this is a piece I wrote a couple of years ago when we were studying Macbeth in year 10. And I've incorporated a creative component to this explanatory piece. So it's in the form of a monologue. And what we're doing here, or what I'm doing, is I am defending the position of the witches in the play Macbeth because they're much maligned and they've got a really bad rap. So I'm challenging that and I'm explaining that reputation is not very fair. So my purpose is to explain why the reputation of Macbeth's witches is undeserved. Fair is foul and foul is fair. Hover through the fog and filthy air. Well, let's dispense with the riddles. It's time to come clean. It's time for a few cold, hard facts. No more chants, no more couplets, no more trocate tetrameter. Nope. I'll talk to you all plainly, honestly, from my heart. For you alone can understand the methods that I have had to use to counter the treatment of a world that never once sought to understand the likes of us, that demonized us and shut us out. Witches, harpies, sorceresses, enchantresses, hags, one and all, welcome. Welcome to the Coven, a forum where I hope that we can work together to change once and for all the reputation of our brood. and what a reputation it is. As you all know, I am the first witch. Yes, Shakespeare didn't even grace me with a name, persecuted right from the start. Nobody to this day knows that beneath this bearded facade, this knock-kneed, crippled frame, I was once the lovely Delilah. Contrary to Banquo's observations, withered and wild, not the inhabitants of the earth. How insulting. A name unbefitting, you might say, the likes of me, a weird sister, prone to casting spells and disappearing into thin air, unbefitting for a being capable of conjuring up the elements. You know how it goes. When shall we three meet again, in thunder, lightning, or in rain? Responsible for mischief and mayhem, responsible for the entire demise of the Scottish throne. So I haven't got to my core point there in explaining why the reputation of Macbeth's witches is undeserved, but hopefully, that lead-in gives you a sense of where this is going as a speech that defends witches from the allegations of their witchery and witchcraft, etc. So that's writing to explain. Now we move on to writing to argue. So you're probably familiar with this form, writing persuasively. A persuasive essay is a type of essay that presents logical arguments with emotional appeal to sway readers to a particular point of view. Persuasive essays can be both a form of academic writing and personal writing. They typically begin with a question that the writer spends the essay arguing in favour or in opposition to. A personal essay writer will make a firm statement that is backed up with a combination of data, research, and anecdotal experience. The writer will often explore opposing positions and counter-arguments as a means to discredit them. So some of our key ingredients here are expert knowledge of the topic, a clear target audience, confident application of research that is interwoven throughout the discussion, references to counter-arguments, and a form that suits the purpose and the context. So whilst writing persuasively in itself can be a form, there are many variants of that, and that's what we're going to look at in a minute. So firstly, some phrasing and vocabulary examples that will help you with your arguments. So clearly, it is evident that, in contrast to, as a result of, despite the belief that, to illustrate, in spite of the view of some that, thus it is apparent that, nevertheless it is obvious that, to clarify the central premise that, now it might seem that, until we acknowledge, because of the notion that, to start, in the end, we must all, the evidence suggests, to rebut, unless we, the fact is. So hopefully, again, some of those phrases will give you the impetus for putting forward arguments in a way that enables you to build your ideas in a really confident and coherent manner. So writing to argue, as I said, persuasive writing in itself is a form, but there's many variants of that. So here I'm going to use the form of a persuasive essay, but I'm going to use personal anecdotes. So I'm going to do a little bit of an Adichie here, and I'm going to incorporate personal anecdotes that reference my own experience to argue that the education system has failed First Nations children. The community of Beagle Bay was named in 1831 by surveyor John Wickham after the ship that Charles Darwin had sailed in, the HMAS Beagle. Before then, Beagle Bay was the tribal grounds of the Nilnul people and had a different name. When the Trappist monks came in the 1890s, Beagle Bay became the home of those forced from their traditional lands across different parts of the Kimberley. It was the great-grandkids of those families whose blood ran through the red desert sand of the Kimberley interior that we taught back in 2001. Like the kids we taught, Jujuan, the subject of the documentary film In My Blood It Runs, has the blood of his ancestors and of the Australian interior running through him. And like the kids we taught, the education system and those responsible for delivering the curriculum have failed to acknowledge the intractable bond between blood and being. Along the Dampier Peninsula coastline, there are parcels of land leased by family groups of the dispossessed. Keith Kitchener was from the desert, a place now known as Fitzroy Crossing. I can't remember his mob, but he had a block of land on the Indian Ocean, and with his permission, sometimes after work, we would head off exploring his place. To the north of Beagle Bay is One Arm Point, where the Bardi staked their claim to a land that was negotiated by tribal groups long before the HMAS Beagle showed up. But Keith Kitchener's block was on Nyunyu country. Okay, so as you can see, I've made my contention around the idea that the education system has failed First Nations children at the end of my opening introduction, and then I've moved again to personal anecdote. So there's a little snippet of a persuasive essay. Okay, so we're moving to writing to reflect now. Writing reflectively. So the essence of reflective writing is to critically analyse an experience, an encounter, or a moment in your life and document its impact on you. Thinking about the new insights gained from the reflective process is also a key component of this type of writing. It's crucial to ensure that your writing is analytical rather than descriptive. So some key ingredients: written in the first person, analytical, it's free-flowing, subjective, a tool to challenge assumptions, it's a time investment as well, loose structure that begins with a dilemma or a problem and concludes with new insight. It often includes anecdotes and examples, and it often includes self-reflection. You'll note that some of the mentor texts that we've looked at seek to both reflect and express, so there's a bit of a crossover there, I think, at times. They can be mutually complementary. So some phrasing and vocabulary examples. Importantly, I realised that when it first dawned on me, I wondered. This was possibly because, after thinking about it, I understood then that I feel that I needed to better understand. It was only later on that I suddenly felt I'd always had the view that this new way of seeing enabled me to, this was a result of, this was in many ways similar to, I wonder what would happen if. Although I am more aware of, I'm still unsure about moving into the future, I will. The turning point was, the first thing I noticed was, I'll recall this time as, whilst it posed many challenges, the opportunity to. Okay, so now let's have a look at an example. So here's a piece that I wrote some time ago, and the form is a personal reflective piece, and the purpose is to reflect on the role of stories in my life. So it's not unlike in many ways the ideas that Adichie is exploring in the personal journeys framework of ideas focus. So when I was little, my father told me that there was such a thing as a paper fairy. His modus operandi was the retrieval of his newspaper every morning. Intermittently, a chocolate frog would appear in the letterbox, and my suspicions about a fairy that my friends knew nothing of were allayed. As a deterrent for wandering into my parents' room in the wee small hours of the morning, my father convinced me that the hallway was strewn with tacks and warned me that if my midnight wanderings continued, I would almost certainly end up with a footful of nails embedded in my heel. He also told me, when I asked him what subjects he taught, that he was a religious education instructor, which I found somewhat confusing given that we were uninitiated into the mysteries of Christianity, and the presence of Jesus in our household was limited to annoyed utterances when someone stabbed their toe or spilt a cup of tea on the carpet. Such were the fibs told to me by a mischievous father, whose sense of the absurd confused rather than enlightened me about the true nature of the world and my place in it. The thing was, my father was such a big personality that much of what he said had, if not the whole, at least a kernel of truth about it. I remember these deceptions vividly, for they fed my curiosity. As fictitious as the paper fairy is, the stories told to me by father, who revelled in the art of embellishment, carry with them a substance unfaded by the years. Like the reader in the final chapter of Foe, I can delve into a 300-year past and recover the remains of a hermetically sealed shipwreck, and the memory is resurrected, reborn, alive, real. Such is the power of storytelling. Whilst many years have passed since I trod barefoot to the mailbox, the surprise of a chocolate frog in the letterbox lingers. So hopefully you can see how I've reflected on the role of stories in my life in this little excerpt here. So now to the exam. So I've modelled this on the sample VCAR exam that was produced last year, and we're using this format as a way of investigating a possible response to the task. So, task instructions. Write a text that explores ideas about your framework. You must use the title provided. You must use at least one of the following stimuli. So, I'm drawing from personal journeys, and from the prompt and stimuli, the title, I Once Was Lost, is going to be the title of my piece. Stimulus 1, Every Day is a Journey, and the journey itself is home by Matsuo Basho. 2, He who learns but does not think is lost. He who thinks but does not learn is in great danger. Confucius. And there we have a visual image as our third stimulus. Obviously, a guy in a maze who can't find his way out. So we're going to take you through a basic example response. We're looking at the framework of ideas, personal journeys. This is a creative piece that I wrote inspired by a appointment that I had with my hand therapist, whose daughter was a little bit confused as she arrived at Southern Cross Railway Station. So you can see, writing creatively, you can just draw on a moment in time as inspiration. So the audience are school leavers, and the purpose is to reflect. So my title is I Once Was Lost. I'm heading to a leadership seminar at Melbourne University, and I'm at Southern Cross Railway Station. I can't get an Uber, and I'm really stressed. I don't know what to do. I think about my ATAR score, 99.95. I'm smart. I'm clever. I'm school captain. Was school captain last year. Now it's 2024, and everything is different. I can do this, I say to myself, but nothing is coming up on my phone, and I'm thinking about how late I'm going to be, and that's when the tears start. So I'm now going to take you through an upgraded example response to the same task. So I once was lost, and we're using here a different narrative form. We're looking at a fractured storytelling mode, which complicates the ideas, I think, in this piece of writing. I'm at Southern Cross Railway Station in the middle of Melbourne, and I am late. It is 11:05 a.m. 99.95. I look at the text and blink. Everything I've been working towards has paid off. I'm happy. I'm delirious. I'm relieved. I'm numb. I believe that I have the leadership qualities that you desire to lead St Mary's in 2023. The values that have shaped the person I am are the same values that we, as a school community, share. I'm committed to the role and believe that I have the capacity to manage the job as well as devote time to my studies. I mean what I say as I steady my gaze and look alternately at the school principal and the deputy. I don't know the school council president, but I try to make myself personable as I give her my sincerest, "You can believe me" look. And I really do mean it. Okay, so here we are going to compare sample responses. So again, our title is I Once Was Lost, and we've got the stimulus that I won't read out again. You're going to bold or underline references to the title and the stimulus in the basic and the upgraded response. So I'll read out the basic again. I'm heading to a leadership seminar at Melbourne University, and I'm at Southern Cross Railway Station. I can't get an Uber, and I'm really stressed. I don't know what to do. Here's our upgraded alternative. I'm at Southern Cross Railway Station in the middle of Melbourne, and I am late. It is 11:05 a.m. So have a go at that, and we will go through it in a minute. How did you go with that? So hopefully you'll see that in both the basic and the upgraded versions of this creative response, there are references to the stimulus and the prompt. So I'll show you where they are. So you can see that I don't know what to do. There's the connotations of being lost and confused. And in the upgraded version, in the middle of Melbourne and being late is also a state of confusion. So in both the basic and the upgraded, we're making clear connections back to the prompt and the stimulus. In this next activity, we're going to compare the language features used in the sample responses. So what I want you to do is to identify the language feature of repetition. in the basic, and then in the upgraded response. So underline or bold the examples to complete this activity. So have a go at that, and then we'll go through your answers. So hopefully it will be very evident to you that repetition is a device that I've used in this creative response. We can see it very clearly in both the basic and the upgraded versions. So I am smart, I'm clever, I'm school captain, was school captain. And then the upgraded version, everything, everything. And then I'm happy, I'm delirious, I'm relieved, I am numb. So you can see the effect of using repetition in terms of really heightening and emphasizing a particular point. The first one is about being clever and self-affirmation, and the second is also about self-affirmation and the feeling of relief that comes after something has been achieved. So in summary, the writing process overview. When writing, it is important to break down the task by looking at what the VCAR criteria says about crafting and creating text. Identify the importance of writing with a clear purpose and audience, and use a form that matches your individual style. So there are 4 different purposes for writing, and you can use any combination of these. You can fuse together a couple if you like, or you can separate them out and write very clearly to either express, which involves leaning into your feelings as a good way of starting, or to explain, providing information about how something works or why something happens. It might be that you want to reflect and you want to critically analyze your actions, consider the cause and effect dynamic as a useful way of approaching this form. Finally, arguing a point is a type of writing that you'll be very familiar with. So this involves writing passionately about a topic you're interested in. Remember, though, you need to research your content thoroughly if you want to sound credible and authoritative. What's coming up next? Refining.